To prepare his estate and to get everything in order, Pushkin left Moscow for Boldino, his family estate. It happened by the end of August 1830, and shortly afterward, a cholera epidemic broke out, and everyone was in quarantine. Pushkin got stuck there, unable to go back to his fiancée or anywhere else. The restrictions were very, very serious. Does it remind you of something, guys? It does. And actually, when the COVID pandemic started, Russian internet was actively comparing this period to the period when Pushkin was stuck in Boldino. Hello, and welcome back to the Roulette YouTube series where we talk about classic, yet a bit less known Russian literature and English translations. If you have come across this channel for the first time, please check out the previous episodes where I discussed The Queen of Spades and The Shot by Alexander Pushkin. In this episode, we continue talking about Pushkin's stories from his Belkin Tales of 1830. Last time, we discussed The Shot and its satirical treatment of a Byronic hero. Today, we will take a look at yet another story from this book, The Snowstorm or The Blizzard, depending on the translation. As always, if you'd like, you can pause this video and check out the story first in the description below. Yes, I've posted the link there. It is very, very short, and I actually do recommend that you read it first. Now, first of all, let's talk about the Belkin Tales. How did the Belkin stories come into the existence? In 1830, Alexander Pushkin was preparing to get married. He was 30 and he proposed to Natalia Goncharova, and they became engaged in March 1830. To prepare his estate and to get everything in order, Pushkin left Moscow for Boldino, his family estate. It happened by the end of August 1830, and shortly afterward, a cholera epidemic broke out, and everyone was in quarantine. Pushkin got stuck there, unable to go back to his fiancée or anywhere else. The restrictions were very, very serious. Does it remind you of something, guys? It does. And actually, when the COVID pandemic started, Russian internet was actively comparing this period to the period when Pushkin was stuck in Boldino. Pushkin was anxious and restless, and he was corresponding with Goncharova, and at the same time writing a series of new and experimental prose and poetry. First, more light-hearted and humorous Belkin stories, and then more serious and darker little tragedies. This period was later named a Boldino Autumn, since this is when Pushkin produced some of his best masterpieces. In any case, the collection of short stories authored by a fictional persona, Belkin, came out and was harshly criticized for being too light, too trivial by Vissarion Belinsky, one of the prominent literary critics of these times. In fact, these stories were way ahead of its time, as noted by David Bethia and Sergei Davidov, two literary scholars. Not until this, meaning 20th century, however, did the tales begin to take on a larger meaning for the history of Russian prose, to become, according to Vladimir Nabokov, experimental short stories, first stories of permanent artistic value in the Russian language. Indeed, what we see here in The Shot, but even more in The Snowstorm, is the ironic subversion of many cliches of the popular genres of 1820s: romantic passion, the motive of fate, and the everlasting love. So let's dive into The Snowstorm, told according to the publisher, aka Pushkin, by Miss K.I.T. Thus, the narrator is a woman, and we should keep this in mind. The story starts with indeed very trivial affair between Maria, a young girl from the middle-class family of landowners, and Vladimir, a poor lieutenant stationed at their place. She is described as being brought up on French novels and consequently was in love. She selected as the subject of her affection a poor army lieutenant staying on leave in this country place. Now, Pushkin is very precise in his word choice. As you see, Maria does not fall in love, but she selects, yes, an object of her affections. The love is mutual, and the only obstacle for her happiness is young man's poverty. For Maria's parents, the young lieutenant did not present a good match, and they forbade their daughter to think of him and received him worse than a retired assessor. Can you imagine? The assessor is just a minor clerk. So again, it's one of the examples of Pushkin's irony. Yeah. Then Vladimir, the lieutenant, convinces Maria to elope with him. In every letter, Vladimir Nikolaevich implored her to trust herself to him, marry him secretly, remain in hiding for a time, and then fall at the feet of her parents, who would of course be touched by the lover's heroic constancy and then happiness, and be sure to say to them, "Children, come to our arms." After some hesitation, Maria agrees, and the lovers plot their elopement for one winter night. However, this is when it all goes wrong. Reflecting on the differences between Tatiana's type for Eugene Onegin, another seminal work by Pushkin, who was the imaginative provincial noble maiden whose reading inspires her creativity, Amanda Murphy, another literary scholar, points out how in two Belkin tales, including Maria from the Snowstorm, each heroine utilizes her superior knowledge of sentimental literature to write herself into her own plots. All conflicts miraculously resolve themselves, resulting in unexpected happy endings or finished plots rather than the open-ended ones. This was one of the main complaints of the critics during Pushkin's life. They did not perceive the irony of these stories. The Snowstorm masks itself to look like a romantic love story and then subverts our expectations. Maria falls in love because she sees herself as a protagonist of a sentimental novel. And as Murphy states, Vladimir, in a way, also agrees to be a part of this romantic plot. Everything is prepared for the grand finale. Maria packs her things, writes a letter to her parents where she addresses them in the most touching words, excused her action by the irresistible force of passion. Having sealed both letters with a seal bearing the device of two flaming hearts and an appropriate inscription, she threw herself onto her bed at daybreak at Dolsdorf. At night, she flees the house and goes out into the snowstorm. And this is where Pushkin leaves her, in the care of fate and of the coachman Tereshka's skill, and turns our attention to the young lover. So, what happens next? We will see. But you will have to wait until next week, or you could read the story right now in the description below. So, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you have enjoyed this episode, and I will see you next time where we discuss what happens to the young lovers and how does Pushkin subvert our expectations. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.